Welcome history creators to episode 20 of Saturday Live. In today's episode, I'm going to be exploring just how good a deal did Mary Trump get from the phenomenally successful launch of her book. It may be interesting for you, it may be eye-opening for some. So let's go and dive into that. But before I do, for those who have never seen me or been on a Saturday Live, let me do my little intro. I'm Ian Bosler. I started Intertype Publish and Print back in 2004. Since then, I've been on a mission to disrupt the traditional publishing industry and remove all the BS content creators must put up with. These quickie training modules will help you build the solid foundations needed to deliver a successful publishing project. Now, you would be living under a cabbage leaf or whatever if you hadn't known about Mary Trump's book. She spills the beans on Donald in a book that's titled Too Much is Never Enough. Now, I think that title says a fair bit about the guy we all know, and like him or loathe him, he's the president of the US, and I'm not going to be making any commentary on how good he is as a president or what have you. I just want to focus in on this deal that Mary Trump has put together with Simon & Schuster. Now, on launch, they sold 950,000 books. That's a record, a world record for a non-fiction book, so a memoir-style book. So there'd been, it's an absolutely massive, book launch. And they've done extremely well, Simon & Schuster. So all credit to them. But how much money did Mary Trump make out of that deal? That's the interesting thing. I think all authors, that's why I encourage all authors to think about it as it's about the profit you make from your writing, because that empowers you to be able to spread your message further, to be able to influence more people, to build a bigger legacy. You need the profit. You need to be able to fund your activities. So let's just dive into it. And I want to simplify this approach too, just round some numbers around so you get a bit of an idea. But before I do, just think of this, let's assume it's 1 million books. Just round it up to 1 million books. Okay. I want you now to think, how much money do you think she made from those 1 million books? Okay. Now, the retail price for that book is roughly $30. It's a hardcover book. Typically for a hardcover book, it's only 240 pages, so it's not a big book, but 240-page hardcover for a book of that type, $30 is US, that is a typical sell price, and I've gone and researched it, and that is the recommended retail price, $29.95. Okay, so it's that day one, a $30 million worth of sales. That's huge, okay, $30 million. Who watching this wouldn't like to be making $30 million sales of their book? I tell you what, I would love to have a book going like that. Absolutely gangbusters. Now, but let's break that down. How much of that $30 million do you think will end up in Mary's pocket? So I just want you to think about that. You just have a wild ass guess right now. How much do you think Mary Trump would have made from that? Okay. Now, if we take it the $30 million, let's start to chip away at it and just see how much she gets. So we start off with the $30 million. Then you've got to think that's the retail price. Okay. Now, just so for those who aren't aware, the mainstream publishing process is, your royalty is a percentage on the profit the publisher makes from your book. Okay, so it's not from the retail price, it's the profit you make. So we've got to start deducting a few things from that $30 million. Okay. The first thing we deduct is the retail margin. Now, typical retail margin's roughly 30%. So let's take $10 million off it. That leaves $20 million for Simon & Schuster to play with. Okay. Now, of course, there's cost to print. That's got to come off it. The cost of the physical book and the cost of distributing it out to all of the retail outlets and through to Amazon and what have you. They're hard costs that are going to be recovered. Okay. For 1 million books, hardcover, they would have bought them offshore, probably in some place like China. They probably would have, by the time it was landed, you're talking around about $10 a book. That's typically what I would see, which gives them now a profit or margin of about $10 million. But they've got some other costs. It doesn't end there. There's some other costs that need to come off there. So they typically take then the marketing costs, legal costs, the costs of editing, graphic design, typesetting, all of these sorts of costs have to come off there. Now we know in this case there was a significant legal challenges placed, the Trump family placed on Simon & Schuster to prevent them publishing the book. Now, I know in America particularly, the legal fees, it's same in Australia, don't come cheap, particularly when you're up against a very well-funded machine like the Trump family. So with those marketing costs, legal costs, etc., let's just assume it's $2 million. And I think that's probably conservative, but let's look at that. So we're now left with $8 million, which would be Simon & Schuster's profit on those million books. Okay. Now, let's assume now royalties, typical royalties on profit, between 5 and 10% is typically the sort of royalties publishers pay. So let's assume it's 10%. She's managed to get the top end of the deal. So the royalties she would have received would be about $800,000. So the $30 million is now down to $800,000. But it doesn't end there, because usually for a deal like this, you would have a literary agent working on your behalf. They're the people who would be looking at marketing your story to a range of publishers and pitching your book idea and helping you get the deal across the line. So they're a valuable part of the process, absolutely. And, Mary Trump would be smart if she had employed a literary agent to do that work for her. Now, their margins or percentage that they get, some do it fixed fees, but typically it's on a percentage basis, and it can be anywhere between 10 and 30%. But let's mid-range, 20%. So that's $160,000 goes off to the literary agent. That leaves her $640,000. Not bad for a day's out there in the marketplace, 640 grand. But that works out at roughly 64 cents a book. Now, that's for the launch. Okay, so we've just seen that she's made a nice handy bit of pocket money, 640 grand. I'll have that any day. Thank you very much. But, equate it back to a per book rate, it's, 64 cents a book. And that's not unusual. When it comes to books of this type, a typical author will be making 50 cents to $1 per book is really about what they make in royalty. So she's, my figuring, it's very much into that royalty range. Okay, so that's the first day. You say, wow, what about subsequent days? Well, there's going to be obviously a lot more book sales, absolutely. A book that sells 1 million on the first day, even though a lot of that was pre-sales, they've done a lot of pre-sale work and pre-marketing and pre-launch marketing, which would have soaked up a big chunk of the ongoing sales. But I typically see something like this. If she sells 1 million going up to maybe even 10 million books, would probably, generally speaking, I'd see it out. That's the way I'd say. It'd be interesting to see how it actually plays out. But typically memoirs have got a very short market lifespan. They've got a very limited range or market audience, and you can burn through those that market very quickly, and it doesn't have a long life. It's they get into the op shop bookshelves, the second grade book sales, usually within 12 months. That's when they're starting to be heavily discounted and flogged off. Okay. Now, when you start to move into that end of the market, of course, the publisher is usually clearing stock. So the back end, you're making a lot less per book because the profit is a lot less. So instead of the publisher selling the book to the retailers at $20 each, they might be doing it at $15 which you're then starting to halve the amount of royalty you make per book, so from 64 cents, you can be down to 20 cents even. So at the back end, the last few million, she'll be, might be making 20, 30 cents a book. But still, that's, probably another $1 million in the back end. I think she's probably got another $2 to $3 million at the front end before they start discounting. So pretty good, return on the time that she would have invested in that book. So she could easily walk away with anywhere between $3 to $5 million, is my guess, for the whole deal. Now, not to be squeezed, to be laughed at. I'd absolutely love a deal like that. Of course, if you've got to be spilling the beans on something really big to be able to achieve something like that, which I think in the present climate, it was the right timing to do it. So how does that compare with self-publishing? Why are we talking about mainstream and self-publishing? I think you need to think about these together. For example, if Mary Trump had come to us and asked us to help her publish her book, to self-publish her book, I would have very, very quickly said, no, you need a mainstream publisher. There's huge amounts of risk involved in what she was doing that only somebody with the deep pockets like a Simon & Schuster would be able to cover that risk. For example, would the book sell? I mean, they probably would have had to place orders for book printing in the order of 10 million plus for something like this. That's a huge risk that they have to carry. There is also then the legal risk. Now, they would have had to place those orders for those book printing before any legal challenges were finalised. And the courts could very well have said, no, you can't sell that, you'll have to pulp it all. All of that risk lies with the publisher. And that's just something, a self-publisher just cannot cover. I can't imagine. Unless you're Elon Musk, I suppose. He's got enough money to cover stuff like that. But you and I, no, it's not for us. But, the other interesting thing to do a comparison on is that the profit per book. You're looking at, let's say it's $1 a book, be it the generous end, so you're making $1 a book. Self-publishing, well, the clients we work with, we typically, $5 to $10 per book is the typical profit range that we look at. So it's a significant difference than compared to what you get from a mainstream publisher. However, you would never get the volumes if you self-publish. You just don't see people achieving those volumes unless you've built an author platform. This is why it's very key to build these author platforms. Building these author platforms will actually make you more attractive to mainstream publishers, absolutely, because it helps them market and sell their book. They know that you as a brand, as an author, have an audience, and it minimises or reduces their risk, so you become more attractive to take on as an author. So that's, again, author platform building is important. But also, if you've got an author platform built, it means that if you continue to self-publish rather than mainstream publish, it makes it easier for you to quickly get sales, to quickly get more profit and put that into your bank account. So, great, author platforms are magnificent. Now, with Mary Trump, when you go through a mainstream publisher, it's the mainstream publisher who's building the platform, not Mary. So if Mary's got another book in her, it's going to be very difficult for her to leverage a platform that she doesn't own. If she got another book, she would really be best placed to go back to Simon & Schuster, who are now going to be in a very strong bargaining position as well, which will then reduce the amount of royalty that she's likely to earn. So yeah, there's a lot of double-edged swords in this. There's a lot of traps for young players going down the mainstream publishing path. And again, I think that's why people like Mary would be best placed if they had a literary agent looking after them to help them guide through all of the mainstream publishing piece. But as a self-publisher, go through, build your platform, build your audience, become attractive to a mainstream publisher, and just, you never know, one day you too could be pulling, like Mary. What we're thinking here could end up being, $3 to $5 million. We're talking real dollars here, US dollars too, by the way. Earnings from her book, just magnificent. Okay, so good luck to her. Good luck to Simon and Schuster. Now, am I going to read the book? No, no. You know, the Donald Trump bullshit doesn't interest me whatsoever. That's for others. It's political games. It's, you know, that's just others to play with, other people's skeletons. Mate, I've got enough skeletons of my own without having to worry about other people's skeletons. So, no, let it go for me. But again, there's a lot of people out there who enjoy reading those sorts of things. So if you do that, by all means, go out and buy the Mary Trump's book. It will probably be some interesting insights, some new insights, and hopefully you will enjoy it. So that's it for me for today's Saturday Secrets. Until next week, have a great week. Stay safe, particularly if you're in Victoria like we are. We're in isolation again. But, you know, all we can do is just follow the rules and behave, and we'll get through all of this. We know it. We've done it before. We'll do it again. So take care. Until next week, have fun. Bye for now.